Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share with us how surviving her own unhealthy relationship led her to a place of finding her passion. She now helps other people move from physically and emotionally unhealthy into a place of thriving. Please help me welcome Zoe Thompson. Hello, Zoe. How are you today?
I am really well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining me. I do have to confess that I love a good accent.
Yeah, the English accent is very popular over there, isn't it? I've noticed that when I've traveled, people do love the English accent, but we love the American accent too, so it goes both ways.
And we have so many options, though. So, yeah, we have a lot of accents for you guys to choose from to love.
Yeah, same here. I think that's always the challenge, isn't it? It's not just recognizing the accent from the country, but also the region or area or state as well. So yeah, it's cool.
Absolutely. Well, before we jump in, I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am living in England. I am Bristol born and bred, which is in the southwest of the country. So we're in between London and Wales. So that's for the geography side of things. I'm a mum. I'm a mum of a 19-year-old young man now. He's going to be 20 next month. He's actually over in the States at the moment in prep school there. And I work as a coach during the day. So I run my own business, Phoenix Coaching, and I work with a variety of people. I would say the niche, if you like, is people who feel stuck, frustrated, and overwhelmed. So not necessarily a particular demographic, more the psychographic of how people are feeling. And so that's who I work with, but I work with individuals, I work with companies as well. My work's really varied. And my background before doing this was I was in the police for 20 years as a civilian. So very varied career and very varied life too. So that's me in a nutshell.
I can definitely relate to that. I have a very varied career as well. I was a police officer. Now I work for a nonprofit and podcast. So I can definitely relate. What got you into coaching? What led you to this path?
So I was a civilian with the police, and so over here we can be made redundant in those roles. So police officers can't be made redundant, but police staff, civilians can. And unfortunately, due to budget cuts and different changes going on in the country, I was made redundant back in 2017. So I looked at it. I had like 12 weeks notice to decide what I was going to do next. And I'd been working for them since 18. So I'd never worked really for another company. But I also thought it was a real opportunity to get to choose what I do next. And so I took all of the best bits out of all of the things that I'd done over the 20 years, took all of the best bits and decided to create a business. So I was mentoring, I was coaching, I was a self-development trainer alongside my day job at that time, which was in business change. So I really loved the dynamic of supporting people through change. I loved the self-development parts of the roles that I did, and so combined it all together. And then with my life experience as well, Phoenix for me was an obvious choice of that, rising from the ashes and sort of looking at supporting people through change. And so I've been doing that since 2017, so just coming into year 5 now. Yeah, I love it, absolutely love it. I mean, redundancy is tough. That's a hard transition. It's a hard change to go through, especially when you've been with an organization for so long. And I think especially with the police, that culture of the police, of it being very family orientated, makes it a real challenge. But now I wouldn't change it for anything. So it's all good.
That had to be kind of scary, especially to be somewhere pretty much your whole life. I mean, really your whole working
Mhm.
and adult life.
Yeah.
So Was it more scary or more exciting to make that change?
Oh god, it was both. It was, and I ping ponged between the two. Like some days it was really exciting, and some days it was really scary. I mean, like you said, that's my entire adult life was working there. All of my adult experiences I could attach to people who I was working with or the department that I was in at the time. And my parents were in the job as well. So, the police service was very much almost like that identity, part of my identity. And so I think it was a shock to start with. And then I think the way that I think anyway, I wanted to see it as an opportunity, but it was still a tough transition. And I was I'm a single parent. So just the responsibilities of not having that regular paycheck, not having that, well, what I thought was job
Mm.
security, and coming into sort of self-employment, there were lots of scary moments in there, but they were also really exciting at the same time. So yeah, it's a real kind of ping pong back and forth in that headspace.
At this point in time, do you now look back and feel it was a blessing?
Absolutely. Yeah, without any doubt at all. And if I think there was part of me that knew I was ready. I think I just didn't know I was ready. Do you know what I mean? It was that
Mhm.
little bit of, okay, you can do this. I think the police service is fantastic in giving you that variety of skills, and they're all transferable. Just don't always know it at the time. But I think, yeah, I think I had planned. I wanted to work as a coach. That was always in the pipeline. But it wasn't the timeline. If I thought I had another couple of years and I was going to smoothly transition, build a business in the background, get, all of these clients, be really secure, and then just kind of seamlessly step into self-employment.
Mm.
And then, yeah, basically it was just a big hard shove of, okay, you're doing it now. Thanks, universe. But I think I was more ready than I thought I was. Just had to do it.
Absolutely, and the universe, God, who whatever you believe in, I think
Yeah,
puts those things in our path when the time is actually right, whether we know it or
yeah.
not.
Yeah, 100%. I think I probably would have just kind of slowed the pace for as long as possible until something happened that pushed me into it. And so I obviously the universe or whoever
Mhm.
said, "Yeah, you're ready. Come on, go. Off you go." And gave me that good solid push.
Let's talk about the phoenix a little bit because I also very much relate to the symbolism of that, as you said, the rising
Mhm.
from the ashes. So, what about that symbolism spoke to you to become basically the the brand of your business?
I think for me, what resonated the most about Phoenix is it's not just the rising from the ashes, but it's rising from the ashes more stronger, more powerful, more resilient, all of those things. And I hear people say all the time, and I've said it myself, I just want to go back to who I was. And I don't think that's possible, because I think when we experience something, when we come through a change, when we face adversity, we change, we grow, we evolve. And so I think for me, the phoenix is really represents that of, you've come through something, and you haven't just come through something, you've grown through it, you've evolved through it, and now you've got another set of tools in your toolbox that you can now use to help you build your future. And I think for me, the phoenix just really represents that. I mean, I've seen, the caterpillar to butterfly and lots of other images that show change, that create change, but nothing ever hit the mark for me like the phoenix did. And I think from my own personal experiences and work experiences, that it is more stronger, more powerful, more resilient. Yeah, that is that just the phoenix is just so powerful with that imagery, that it was a no-brainer for me.
I think it's also when you think about the caterpillar to the butterfly, that'd be a really weird graphic image to make. Like, the butterfly is cool,
Yeah, the
but to
caterpillar, not so much. Yeah, it's not, yeah. I think there's lots out there, isn't there? And I've joked with people, here, if you're not a butterfly or a phoenix, are you really a life coach? Because there's so many people that use similar imagery. But I think, and it's cool, there's lots of coaches and we all do things in a slightly different way. And it would make sense that there'll be certain imagery that resonates with a lot of us. I think it's just how you then do it in your own way, isn't it? Of shaping it to represent you and your own image and your own branding and what you feel you represent as an individual.
I know that for a lot of coaches, what brings them to enter that field is that they have gone through their own experience and they have been able to pull themselves out of it, like you said, better and stronger. And I know one of the things that you talk about is bringing people from a physical and emotionally unhealthy place into a better place. Will you talk a little bit about your own experience and how you were able to make that transition from unhealthy to healthy for yourself?
Sure. And I think for me it is my personal experience, but I think also from a professional experience of working in that environment. And not, it's both sides of it. And I was working with victims, with offenders who wanted to change, who wanted to be on a different path, who wanted to make different choices that would have a different outcome. So there was that going on. And then working in business change, you're changing how people are working, how people are operating. And then for myself personally, we have a similar story in terms of working in law enforcement and also living in that unhealthy environment. And for me, that was, I have lots of t-shirts, as they say. I've been there, worn the t-shirt, and I have lots of experiences. And I think for me, it's about, something will happen that tells you it's time to change. And I was working for the police, similar to, I've heard you tell your story, similar thing, putting a uniform on, going in, supporting people in a very, very similar situation, and going home and not necessarily recognizing that was me. I was
Mhm.
going in with a very different kind of approach, different perspective. And for me, there were lots of times where the universe was sending me the signs of, okay, you need to make some different
Mhm.
decisions and you need to take a different path. And I just wasn't there yet. The signs were there. I wasn't there mentally ready to make those decisions. And then, very sadly, we lost a friend of ours, family friend, in the London bombings. So that, for me, being at her funeral, she was 2 years younger, my sister's best friend. We grew up really, really closely with her. And it was that, funerals are funny, aren't they? Because you sit there and, you're with all of the same people, you're in that space, and people talk about, oh, if she was here now, if she's looking down now, she'd be so proud of the people that turned up. And I suddenly felt very exposed because I hadn't shared my home situation with anybody. Nobody knew. It was completely, I lived two different lives, almost
Mhm.
two different people. There was the person I was at home, and then there was the person in the uniform doing the job, you know, two different people. And people saying, well, she'll be looking down. And I suddenly thought, whoa, okay, I feel really exposed.
Hmm.
Like, if she's looking down, she knows. She knows exactly what's going on. And also the type, she was, very much character who, growing up, we were very similar, like a proper, bit feisty, bit sassy. And I thought,
Mhm.
she'd be pissed if she is up there now looking down. She's not going to be happy with what situation I'm in. Then the kind of funeral started, and her family came down carrying her coffin, and I looked around the church and I thought, this is going to be me. like, it's going to be the same people. It's probably going to be the same church. It's going to be the same people sitting here if I don't do something. And that for me was my catalyst for change. I mean, as you'll know, and as people listening will probably know, it's not quite as simple as just going home and
Mhm.
going, yeah, I'm done with this, love. I'm just going to pack my suitcase and go. It wasn't as simple as that. It actually took another 12 months for me to find a situation where it was sort of safe for me to leave. But that for me was that was the day. The day was like, okay, I need to make some different decisions. If I want things to change, I'm going to have to take control of it. And I think at that point, I was then ready. And that, God, I mean, a couple of years, it was just lots of small steps. I
Mhm.
mean, it was a couple of years of just one day at a time, just focusing forward, just doing what you can with what you've got, and just making lots and lots of small changes. And it wasn't just the mental and emotional changes. I mean, I picked the easy one first. I picked the physical one because for me, I'm like, physical change isn't easy, but for me, with everything else that needed to be done, the
Mhm.
physical change was the easy one. You know, I know you work in different measurements, but I was like 3-4 times the size I am now, had a terrible relationship with food. I think for me, looking the way I did, there was no self-care.
Mhm.
There was no kind of, you deserve to put better food in your body. You deserve to be looking after yourself. And also, I think it was a little bit of my way of trying to hide and not be seen. So the physical change was felt like the easier one, but eventually it was kind of, okay, the mental and emotional changes, you need to work on that as well. And so yeah, it took a few years. It did take a few years. And the coaching didn't come until later. I for me, it was really important that for me to be able to support other people, I needed to have completed the journey for that
Mhm.
before I started to walk that journey with other people. I'm on a constant journey. We're all a work in progress. I am by no means am I the finished article, but I think it was really important for me to have worked on that and resolved that in before I started kind of reaching out to support other people. So yeah, it was a crazy journey, because what happened with that is the things that helped me to recover then suddenly launched me into this crazy space of competing in strength competitions, because it was the strength training that actually helped with the physical changes, changing my health, my diet. And then that just kind of took off. I think it was, I guess, being able to take control of something. And
Mhm.
with weight training, you take control of it, don't you? You go in, and it's the mindset, you have to eat properly, you have to eat well to be able to go in and do well. And I think having that control, of having that space to go in and really push myself, really test myself, helped me to kind of overcome a lot of the things that had been holding me back. But then I ended up competing, and ended up finding this world of strong women, and finding this group of really supportive people. So yeah, it kind of picked me up and then launched me into a different world for a couple of years of just everything changed. And then the coaching came after that. So it was kind of one of those years of like just kind of being really lost for quite a long time. Of people describe it as surviving, but it was just getting up every day, getting through the day, and then again getting through the next day, and then the next day, and then it was surviving, the like moving out of that and the recovery from that. And then all of a sudden, when you start to things start to resolve, you end up with this bundle of energy of like,
Mhm.
okay, like, what do I put this into? And then it just kind of launches you into the unexpected. But yeah, it was an amazing couple of years, and it's taught me so much about myself, and about lots of things that I can now also put into coaching as well. So it's just even more tools in the toolbox to be able to use with the people that I get to work with. So That was a very long answer to a very short question. Sorry.
No
It's a very British way of
apology.
doing things.
Yeah, no apology needed. I'm so intrigued by the strong woman piece of this.
Mm.
So, we're going to get back to why we're really here. But for a moment, tell me a little bit about these competitions and what was that like for you to go from being overweight and unhealthy to suddenly competing with other people because you are super badass and strong?
And it was just the craziest thing because I was using strength training to like I said, to help me, and but I found that pushing myself in the gym was helping me to push myself in other places as well. But it came to that conversation. I had a PT at the time, and the PT said, as they do in January, what is it you want to do this year? And I said, I think I'd kind of like to explore like what is out there. And I said that this year, what I'd like to do is just kind of get an idea of what other people are doing in competitions, and maybe use that as a bit of a challenge for me to work on with you. And we got about a month in, and he said, you need to go and put this to the test properly. So I went and did a regional competition, and ended up getting the last spot for England, so nationals. And then England's, I got fourth place, which qualified me for Britain's I placed second, which qualified me for Europe's. So I think it was almost a year to the weekend of my first ever little local competition that I
Mhm.
did for fun. A year later, I was competing at Europe's Strongest Woman, which was insane. But it also made me realize that there was a point for me where, okay, I'm working full time, I'm a single parent. This takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of focus. And obviously, the higher the level, the more serious it gets. You can't just rock up to these things and play about with it. So I think at that point I sort of realized, okay, where I guess where the fun element was for me, and when that
Mhm.
became almost not, but I don't want to say a burden because it wasn't that, but it just in terms of what was a priority for me in life, I couldn't do it. You can't do it all. You can't do it all. So I decided that actually, sort of the more sort of regional level was enough for me. But then, the universe clearly had different ideas because the redundancy then kicked in the year after, and I found that I mean, training for a long time was a real release for me. It was a very healthy way for me to kind of outlet that stress, tension, and all the rest
Mhm.
of it. But I think when you're training for a competition, it adds a different dynamic to your training sessions, and it just, for me, the balance then became off. So I took a step back from it to focus on. I mean, now when you're building a business, it ticks a lot of the same
Mhm.
boxes as the training element. So it's just I'm still doing very similar things, still ticking the same boxes, just in a different way.
I know a lot of people get involved in some type of sporting activity and it does start to take over their lives. So, how difficult was it for you to see that maybe it was shifting your priorities in the wrong direction and you wanted to do a bit of a reset? Was that tough for you or did it come pretty easily?
I think it was tough until I sort of sat down and went, okay, what's going on here? Why is training feeling very different?
Mhm.
And I think it was a case of sitting down and just realizing that there are so many hours in the day, and you do only have so much energy. And my son was great. I mean, he was in his teens at the time. He's in the sporting world because I mean he's a basketball player, hence why he's in the States.
Mm.
So he gets the dynamic of, you have to train, you have to put the work in, you have to show up, you have to be consistent, you have to be driven and disciplined, and all of those things. He got that, and he was incredibly supportive. but it also came at the time where he was starting to go into his exams. So for me, parenting
Mhm.
definitely sat higher on that priority list of, okay, you can't do it all. You know that it's not in your character to go in and give it 20%,
Mhm.
50%. It's just not in my nature. So for me, it was easier to take that step back completely and shift my focus into different areas than it was to try and do some of it and take that step back. I that's just it's I don't know that works for some people, but for me it's easier to take that step back and just go, right, what are the priorities and where do I want my focus and energy to be going? And I think parenting just takes over. The mum headspace took over and made the decision, and it made it an easier decision to make.
So I want to go back to when you were in your unhealthy situation, your
Mhm.
abusive relationship, and you said you realized at that funeral that something had to change, but it took time for you to make that change. What I would like for you to talk about, though, is some of the steps, the baby steps that you took in that 12 months, because I do think a lot of people feel like, well, I have to leave today. I got to get out now. And if I don't do that, well, I guess I'm just stuck. So, will you talk about your thought process in being there, but beginning the small, healthy changes?
Mhm. And the honest answer is that there are quite big pockets of time in that time where I have very little memory. I think it's one of the way that our brains do well in looking after us, isn't it? Of it
Hmm.
just kind of, yeah, you don't need to hold on to that bit. Let's let that bit go. And I do remember going home from that funeral and having that conversation and just saying, this isn't work. This isn't working. I can't do this anymore. I don't have the energy to do this anymore. We both know it's not working. And whatever happens, I don't see us being able to fix this. And then it was almost a case of just trying to reset some different boundaries of, okay, what does this look like? I mean, I don't think for 1 minute he believed I was going.
Hmm.
And I guess from looking back on it, I probably tried to use that as an advantage of, okay, he thinks this is not going to happen. So I can just put things in place, start setting things up in the background, start looking for that opportunity to be able to go, knowing that he's just going to carry on day to day without really putting too much value on what I've said. But knowing that I'd said it, knowing that I'd had that conversation, and knowing that I had said that out loud,
Hmm.
and that I knew then I could start doing what I needed to do. And for me, it was just a lot of things about trying to put things in place, like trying to sort of make some small changes to finances. I mean, I still didn't have that conversation with people.
Hmm.
So when I did move out, people knew I was moving out, but they didn't necessarily know the full picture. I guess some people probably had their suspicions, but it wasn't a conversation that was had. And I didn't have those conversations with people until quite a long time after, purely just to kind of have that accountability of, okay, you
Hmm.
need to know this, because then I've got that support there. If I start talking about doing something differently, then you can help hold myself accountable. So I think there's lots of small changes of just trying to kind of get things ready so that when an opportunity came about, I was ready to go. And then just, I think it is a bit of a blur, if I'm being honest.
Hmm.
But it was just a case of, I think it's just that hope. Something changes when that hope kicks in, and you can see that there will be a path out. And I can't describe it. You're nodding. I know you probably get
Hmm.
it, and I think there will be other people listening who get it. But there was an element of hope that changed that dynamic of the survival for a reason. I mean, my son was the reason. Up until that point, just the survival for him was my reason to get up and keep going. And then, once I'd made that decision to go, it was just the dynamic shifted slightly into changing for a future, hope for different future rather than just keep on going.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
It's a very, very hard thing to describe, isn't it?
it is, but for me, like you said, it does completely make sense because I feel like when we make that decision inside of us, whether we verbalize it or not, when we decide I am going to do this, and yes, it might take me a week, a month, a year, but
Mhm.
I am doing it, something changes inside of you because you know that you've made that decision. And I think there is a difference. They say it takes people 7 times, average 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. But I think when you really decide, it, your being knows it, and it just
Yeah.
feels different to you.
Yeah, and I think this is what's really important, not not just for people who are in this situation, but for people who are friends and family of people in this situation, is you can't take control of this. I totally get you want to roll your sleeves up, you want to get in there and help them to do this. But that's just another element, even though with the best of intentions, it's another element of somebody taking control or being in control of this individual's life. And so you have to give them the space and that no, just keep telling them that support is there. When they're ready, you will be there. But as hard as it is, you've got to just sit there and wait until that person makes that decision for themselves, because it's a totally different feeling to you making that decision for them. And that's why I think there is a big return for, when law enforcement get involved or when support services get involved, and with the best of intentions, put that individual in a position where they feel they have to rather than choosing to. Two totally different things.
It really is, and it's very similar in that regard, I believe, to addiction. When
Mhm.
somebody is forced to go to treatment, whether they're being forced by their partner or by the legal system,
Yeah,
when they're forced to do it, it's
yeah,
not going to take because it's not their conscious decision. And I feel like it's the same thing in an unhealthy relationship.
yeah.
Until it is your decision to go or to make the change, it's just not going to stick.
No, no, I absolutely agree. And what it takes to take that step and then keep the momentum going of all the steps that need to follow. I mean, we know statistically is the leaving that
Mhm.
increases the risk. You've got to be ready to face that, and you've got to be in that place. The situation puts you in that place, but you've got to be ready to be in that place to deal with the fallout of the walkout. And that's the tough bit, because it's also unknown. When you're in it,
Mhm.
you learn how to respond to it. You learn to manage, or at least manage how you cope with it. When you leave, it's a whole different set of behaviors that you don't know. In fact, the individual doesn't know because they don't know how to control it. So they try different things. So you're faced with an unknown, which needs a whole different bucket of energy and survival techniques. And you've got to be ready to step into that, and you need the support. And it's great that there's support services and families and friends that are able to do that, but it's not them that's got to face it. It's not them that's got to walk it and keep going.
I agree. And I want to ask you about that, the actual leaving part, because when I was preparing to go, I did not tell my abuser. I was getting ready to move out, but he thought we were looking at a place to move together. So I knew that wasn't the case, but I couldn't tell him that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very interested when you said, like, you went home that day and you had that conversation with him that things weren't working and something had to change, even though he didn't believe you. But how scary was it for you to have that conversation? Because, like, I can't imagine having done that in my situation. So tell me a little bit about that.
And it's got some similarities to yours. So there was an opportunity to move, and I I remember the conversation of saying, okay, if you are moving with us, this is what needs to happen. And I knew that he would never agree to what I was proposing. So, I mean, it was a risk. It was a risky move, but all of it was a risky move in fairness. But it was. I knew he wasn't going to agree to it. But what I said was if you don't move with us today, you've made that decision. So if you are not moving with us, then I will take that your decision is made, and you don't change your mind. Now, what that meant was that I moved into the new place. He didn't move. In fact, I remember him lying on the sofa, being quite sarky, and while I was kind of moving stuff out, not really taking it seriously. But what it meant was that I was behind the doors in a new place when
Mm-hmm.
he showed up. And then when he showed up and said, "You need to let me in," and I said, "No, I told you, you made that decision when you didn't move with us yesterday. That was you making the decision. This is it now. You've made the decision, and this is it." But I was behind my door in
Mm-hmm.
my space. I mean, can feel it now, almost remembering it. But it was a case of giving, almost lying it there for him to make a decision,
Mm-hmm.
but putting it in a way that I knew. I knew what decision he would make, but then being able to put myself in a position where I was in a safe space
Mm-hmm.
with, with that door. I mean, he didn't. That wasn't the end of it by any means, but
Right.
that was the conversation that happened. Was okay. We're moving. If you want to move, this is what needs to change, because it's a new house, new bills set up. You will be on the direct debit. This will happen. This will change. All of these things, knowing that he would not, because again, it's not taking control, isn't it? He would want to do it his way, but
Mm-hmm.
knowing that the minute I could get through that door, that was it. I would then be able to take the control. I just then had to hold on to it.
How did that feel to be able to be on the other side of that door and say no?
Oh, scary, but a different scary,
Mhm.
to the other scary
Mhm.
stuff. It was um, almost, when you get that shaky feeling of you're standing your ground, but this
Mhm.
isn't the end of it, but that something's shifted, that things are starting to change. Um, yeah, I feel a bit for the neighbours when we moved into that place, but I mean, I think it took a couple of weeks before I started to feel like, okay, it's getting going a bit quieter. But I'm not, ultimately, as is often the case, it went quiet when he met somebody else, and
Mhm.
so his attention changed. Um, which, yeah, I'm not, but yeah, it was a scary feeling, but a very different type of scary, in that, yeah, it was almost just that feeling of a little bit of control coming back, which I'd not felt for a long time. So yeah, it was a good scary.
You mentioned when he met somebody else, and so his attention shifted, and I never really thought of that about that before, but did you ever have the desire to warn her about what kind of person he was? I did not. So when I got away, and maybe that's the wrong attitude, I don't know, but, I was like, "I'm out."
Yeah,
Um, did you ever have that feeling like you wanted to tell her anything, or did you just let it go?
I not at the time, because I think at the time I think my kind of the awareness of anybody else in the world at that
Mhm,
point was kind of really limited. I think there was a sense of relief of, okay, this is going quieter. I remember having a conversation with her because my son was spending time at the house. I wanted to meet her, a very brief conversation. um, but I think at that point I mean, you wonder. Again, it's that element, isn't it? Of you wonder whether maybe he is different with somebody else. Maybe this, maybe this isn't about him. Maybe this is how I handled the situation. So I think there was some questioning going on around that as
Mhm.
well, which proved not to be the case, unfortunately. But I think, yeah, I mean, we've got laws here where the police can disclose if you are in a new relationship and there is a concern for your safety because of previous convictions or reports of domestic violence, domestic abuse. We have laws here where the police can disclose that information.
Wow.
It's fairly new. I say fairly new, probably in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, but we do have that law here. So family members, if they're concerned, they can ask for checks to be made, and potential victims can be warned that this is who they're coming into a relationship with. I don't think it's a very well known law, but it is there. But I think there has to be a conviction or a significant number of information reports or
Mhm.
calls to support that. And I'd never called. I'd never
Mhm.
called the police. In fact, the first time the police were called was after I'd left. So I think that probably wouldn't have counted. But yeah, I think I think they then went on to have children together, and it ended up in a similar way, unfortunately. And I think there's that element, isn't there, of could I, should I didn't.
Mm.
But I think, yeah, it's such a difficult one, isn't it? Because where does your responsibility end, and
Mhm.
where does their responsibility for themselves start? Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, we're still in contact because we have children with the same father. So,
Mhm.
we have. I mean, obviously, with my son being older now, he manages that all himself. But yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
It
I
is.
can say, I can look back on it and say that I was not in that headspace to be thinking about other people at that
Mhm.
point. So yeah, if I
I
could go back, would I? Yeah, I don't
I
know.
yeah,
How
and
do you
I'm in the
have that
same.
conversation? Because it's not what people want to hear either, is it? And
Right.
also, if somebody had come and had that conversation with me, would I have done anything different? No, because
Probably
I know my
not.
stubborn ass would have taken no notice at all.
Yeah, I've never really thought of it before, but just when you were speaking about it, it just
Mhm.
made me wonder because I agree I was not in that headspace either. And then, like you said, people aren't going to listen. Oh, she's the jaded ex. She's just trying to ruin our relationship.
Yeah.
But it's just something I've never thought of.
Yeah.
So when when their relationship turned to be very similar to yours, was there any part of you that felt, I don't wanna say relief, but kind of like, "Okay, it's not me. It wasn't me. This is him. This is who
Mm,
he is."
a good question. I think because of the time frame and how long there was between me going and then that happening, I think I'd already resolved all of that. I think it was more a case of I think for me the challenge then was having the conversation with my son because I'd
Mhm,
protected him from that because he was only small and he was 5 when I left. So he didn't need to know any of that. There wasn't any need for him. And I also, as much as possible, wanted to protect his relationship with
mhm,
his dad. I think the difficulty then was okay. Now you have to have some really honest conversations with your son about, and answer questions that he had. But I think by that point, I'd resolved all of that. That had all been kind of pocketed away. I think what I did do, which I think is important probably to share, and certainly something that I talk through with, in terms of people that I work with, was taking some ownership of the part that I played. So not taking responsibility for his actions, but looking back and thinking, okay, knowing what I know now and being who I am now, what would I do differently? How might I respond differently? What decisions might I make at a different point that would have helped with a different outcome? And that's been really helpful for me in working through that, because I think it can be very easy to put all of the blame on an individual, and actually, quite often a lot of the responsibility should be taken by the other individual. But I do firmly believe that if we were there, we played a part in it, and that we can still take some ownership for the role that we played and the decisions that we made, so that we can learn from it. And I think that has been the most important thing for me, is to take the learning from it, to reflect on the part that I played, the decisions that I made, so that when I am potentially in a similar situation, I can make different decisions. I can choose how to respond to it differently. And that was quite a big part of I guess, my journey, and that sort of recovering and being able to move myself forward was, okay, I'm responsible for some of this. I'm not completely blameless, but that's not, I think for me, that was part of I guess, the empowerment of
Mhm.
being able to walk from it and walk forwards.
And I think that's one of the hardest things to do because the abuser is the one who is doing the bad things, but it's like you said, it's not that the victim is to blame, but there are decisions that we could have made differently to change the situation. So I
Yeah.
love how you put that and how you used it as something to empower you to move forward
Mhm.
instead of playing more of the victim of,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, if I'd have just done this, gosh, I'm terrible." So I love how you flipped it for the good.
Yeah, and I think, I can look back on it now and see that I did certain things with really good intentions, but actually enabled some of it. And it's so hard to be able to verbalize that without that being misunderstood. But as I guess, as an example, there were certain things in the very early days that I let go,
Mhm,
that I kind of not turned a blind eye to, but was probably, just took a step back and thought, okay, there's all of this going on. Just, don't give them a hard time. Don't do, and I think boundaries weren't put in place early on
mhm.
to say, no, this is not how it's going to be. We need to work on this. We need to talk about this, or we need to find a different way of how we respond to this. And I think with good intentions, there were certain things that I let go past, that actually possibly fed into it. I don't know for sure. I kind of do know for sure, but I don't know for sure.
Mhm.
But I think there's certain things that for me is the learning of, okay, set your boundaries. You know what's important to you. You know what your values are. You know where your line is, and that is where the boundary is set. Your house rules. And I think that for me has been really important in knowing that going into other friendships, other relationships, of being more aware of my house rules. Okay, you want to come in
Mm.
my house, if I tell you you got to take your shoes off, you got to take your shoes off. It's my house, my rules, and being confident enough, empowered enough to protect that. And if that means they don't want to come in the house, that's their decision.
I love that you said relationships and friendships because I think a lot of people are in toxic friend relationships and don't even realize it. So I'm very glad that you added that in. Hopefully, people will hear that and realize that it's okay for you to stand up for yourself in your friendships to make sure those are
Mhm.
healthy. I love your house, your rules. I think that's a great way to look at it. Tell me a piece of relationship advice that you would give out, to everybody.
Ooh, good question. I genuinely think that the most important relationship is the one that you've got with yourself. And I think it's really important. And this is something I've worked on, for myself, let alone with other people, is being able to tick the box to fulfill the needs that you have yourself through a variety of people as much as possible. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket, and don't rely on other people to tick a box you can't tick for yourself. And I think that's really important. People should add value, not fill gaps. Yeah, I think it's a tough one, isn't it? But I do think I think more people would benefit from working on the relationship with themselves, and then they can add value to a relationship with other people. But I think it's very easy, isn't it, to meet people and want them to fill the void or fill the gap that is there, or we become very reliant on one person, one individual, to fill all of the gaps. And then when that person is not there for whatever reason, it leaves a massive void. So for me, it's working out what's important to you. How do you tick those boxes, and how can you tick it for yourself? And then people add on to it. They're not kind of making it up for you. You got to make it up for yourself. I think
I,
that's really important.
yeah, I love it. Add value, not just fill gaps. I think that's
Hmm.
huge. We are going to talk about something entirely different here before we close out. We're going to talk about tattoos
Okay.
because, we've talked about some heavy stuff. So we're going to lighten it
Yeah,
up before we go. I love tattoos, and I think you might have a tattoo
I
that
do.
I would love to hear about and hear about the significance to you.
Okay. So I have the word life in Arabic as a tattoo. So my name means life in Greek. It's a Greek
Mhm.
name, but it means life. But I have the word life in written in Arabic. My son is half Arabic, so that's the reason why it's in Arabic rather than in Greek. I've actually looked at changing or having it evolved, if you like,
Mhm.
into a phoenix. So the word will still sit there,
Mhm.
but have the phoenix layered onto it, because it is significant. It was very significant at the time when I made that decision. My life has moved on since then, but I also think that phoenix element of evolving the word into the
Mhm.
phoenix or into something else would keep the significance of what it was at that time, but also bring it into who I'm becoming now. So yeah, that's where it is. It's a very simple Arabic word, and they wanted, we looked at something that was a little bit more fancy, a little bit more flamboyant, and I really wanted something very simple, kind of like I like
Mhm.
things kept simple. But now I've kind of got this urge to have it evolve into something that is meaningful now, but not taking
Mhm.
away that path, that significance that it was.
I love that, and that was gonna be my next question is there a phoenix tattoo in your future? So it sounds like maybe there is, as an
Mm,
addition to what you have. Since you come to the States on a fairly regular basis, I can recommend some people for
fantastic.
you if you need that. Any other tattoos in your future?
I don't know. No, I think I would probably just leave it at one. I did go for a nose piercing last year, so I think that
Okay.
that was quite adventurous for me. I think it's that dynamic as well, isn't it? Of the police kind of very
Mhm.
uniformed, very disciplined, kind of strict rules. That it feels quite rebellious, even just having that done. So I don't know that there will be anything more. I think I can definitely see something being added to, probably around a birthday milestone, I think, or
Mhm.
that a certain milestone. I think I'll go and do it. But I think I want to spend some time making sure it's the right
Mhm.
phoenix, in the same way that I did with the branding. Just kind of playing about with it, sitting on it for a bit, coming back to it. I want it to mean something for a long time.
I love it, and I can't wait to see it.
I'd definitely
Well,
see it.
Zoe, where can people find you if they are interested in coaching, if they are interested in having an afternoon tea with you and just listening to your accent? Where can people track you down?
So I'm on all the socials, but I think probably the best place is to go to the website. It's just phoenixlifecoach.co.uk. Nice and simple. But I'm on all the socials and more than happy to be found. And I love chatting to people, so more than happy for people to get in touch.
Excellent. Well, Zoe, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time today. And I know the audience is absolutely going to get so much from what you shared. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Zoe as much as I did. I truly appreciate her talking about setting boundaries not only in romantic relationships, but in friendships as well, and looking inward to determine how you can add value to other people and how they can add value to your life rather than just filling gaps. So remember, until next week, you are strong enough and you are worth it.